Hi. If we use the number I to designate as it is the square root of -1, so I is an imaginary number such that I squared is -1. So how? Let's look at calculating what the square root of I+1 would be. So what we need to do here is we're going to just define the square root of the whole of I+1. We just define it as x plus iy, another complex number. And then what we need to do is we need to find out what x and y are. So what it means then that if we square both sides, so we say just 1 plus I, which is obviously the square root of I+1, but we've just swapped them around. 1 plus I then is got to be x plus iy all squared. So it works out then as x squared plus 2xiy, and then plus I squared y squared. And of course the I squared gives us -1, so we get the minus y squared. So what we've got to do here is we've got to match up the real and the imaginary parts of the equations. So of course the real part on one side, it's 1, and then on the other side it's x squared minus y squared, so 1 equals x squared minus y squared. So if you actually just add y squared to both sides, it means then that 1 plus y squared equals x squared, or we can say x squared equals 1 plus y squared. So x itself then is the square root of 1 plus y squared. Then if we match up the imaginary sides then, I itself is equal to 2xiy. So if you just divide both sides by I, you've got 2xy equals 1. So what we do, because we know then that x equals the square root of 1 plus y squared. So if you substitute that in the 2xy equals 1, we've got 2 times the square root of 1 plus y squared times y equals 1. So what we do now is, in a sense, we square both. We're doing really two things at once. We're going to square both sides and then, in a sense, divide by 4. So if you square, in a sense, if you just square both sides, you'd have 1 plus y squared brackets times y squared times 4 equals 1, which means then that 1 plus y squared brackets times y squared on its own is equal to a quarter. So what we want to do now is we want to make a quadratic equation where the subject actually is y squared. So it means then we know that y squared squared plus y squared minus a quarter equals 0. So just applying the rules then for the quadratic equation is y squared itself, you've got the minus b plus or minus this, which is of course -1, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. So the 4ac then, so we've got the 4, the a is a 1, and then the c is minus a quarter. So we end up by saying 1 plus 4 times 1 plus a quarter, all divided by 2a, which is 2. So that works out as the -1 plus or minus the square root of 2, because the 4 and the quarters cancel out, so we just have the square root of 1 plus 1, so it's the square root of 2 over 2. So we're saying that 1 plus y squared, x squared, which is 1 plus y squared, equals the 1 plus or minus the root of 2. Now, because the y, x and y, because they're both real numbers, that means then that the x squared and the y squared, they've actually got to both be positive. So that means then we can only take because if you took the negative, the square root of 2, you'd end up with x and y then being like square roots of negative numbers, which we don't want because they're real. So in a sense, so we've got x squared is actually just the 1 plus the square root of 2, and then the y is the minus 1 plus the square root of 2, because x squared is 1 more than y squared. So that really, in a sense, that minus a half becomes plus a half. So now x itself, we've then got to take the square root of both sides. So x then is just 1. The square root, well, x is 1 plus root 2 over 2. Take the square root of it all. And then y is, because we've got like a minus 1 plus square root of 2, we'll call it square root of 2 minus 1 over 2. So that's the y. So then, to summarize then, the square root of i+1 is 1 plus root 2 over 2 square root of the whole lot plus I times root 2 minus 1 over 2, the square root of the whole lot. Okay, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that, and goodbye.